All right, so welcome to the Leading Movement Health Series, and I'm your host, Phil Wagner, founder and CEO of Sparta Science. Here we host discussions with invited guests who have vast experience between this intersection of tribal leadership and health. And a lot of times when we talk about health, we're talking about movement health, which is the ability to move without pain or fear. And we often have the data and the insights. So where's the blockers, where are the challenges? And a lot of times it's around leadership and how we can encourage the success of the organization. And so today's guest, Michael Cheika, is currently the Argentina head rugby coach for the upcoming Rugby World Cup. Prior to that, he was with Australia, and in 2015 was named the World Rugby Coach of the Year. And he's also the only coach to have won major rugby championships in both hemispheres, northern and southern. And so one of the reasons Michael's joining us today is, his intuition and the ability to meld culture and instincts with data and technology is very impressive, and continues to, balance the way we look at data, but also with intuition and experience. And so today we're going to talk a lot about how organizations can learn from that and balance that culture and technology, and really make sure you don't lose that grit, but at the same time, it's in a way that's scalable and targeted. So, Michael, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So, starting with kind of this first question of why is health important to your organization, or whether that's the current organization or organizations in the past?
Yeah, well, I think it's the source of all energy, like you're feeling, get up, think about yourself. You get up in the morning, you're feeling healthy, you're feeling good, that you got so much drive to do so many things. And in the sports environment, like I imagine in many environments, we're looking for that intrinsic motivation, like players and people driven from the inside, driven by themselves to achieve things. And that all starts with the energy that they bring to the table. And it's often hard for us to see it because it's not tangible often, and it's not in plain sight. So feeling good is the precursor to making others feel good, and bringing your energy into the environment that you're in. So health across the board, whether it's physical and mental, are so extremely important, and so often taken for granted because, we think that's just our given right, but something you got to work on.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's not only the health and energy of yourself or one player, because it is infectious. That energy can be felt and transferred to others at the same time.
Yeah, it's huge. Like that's, I think, proven in sports without a doubt. It's that it's often called momentum in a game. The energy catches fire from one person to another, and the feel good factor, and that you trace it back. Like if you physically wake up healthy, like first of all, you can get up, and they often say you got a spring in your step. Like you're feeling good. You're ready for whatever challenges are going to meet you, and often that the chemical equation that comes to feeling good physically leads to feeling good mentally as well, and that can be really beneficial when there's high demand on you for energy output in a day, as well as high performance, and the stresses that come with competition.
Right. Yeah, and so obviously it's that energy and that health is such a big part of the organization that you work with now and in the past. What are some, are there any key stories or takeaways where you've had to really come in and overcome that as a challenge?
Well, I think that it's the precursor, like we talked about before, to energy, but also if we bring it to more of a business point of view, if you look at it from a business angle, we talked about it, many times, you and I previously, is about availability. Like how many players on your roster do you have ready to go on any given day? And that comes down to how they're feeling, because that health and well-being inside of the person who's got to perform is key to them being able to keep performing, less likely to encounter injury, right? Because often the amount of times that injuries are occurred through the fatigue factor or through the lack of concentration factor. And so that they're small margins, but they all accumulate. And when it's looked after, whether it's food, sleep, um, prehab or prevention work, whatever it might be, it's so important to have a good overall health inside of your roster of players so that you can have one, that availability, and then two, as you spoke about, the energy to bring it every day.
Mm. Yeah, that was one of my more memorable experiences when we first met, talking about health and performance. And I was expecting to hear, hey, I want my players to get faster. I want my players to get stronger. And your answer was simple. It's every week. I want every player available so I can choose, which players are going to be involved and in which methods, right? It was such a simplified approach.
Well, yeah, you've got a certain amount of tools at your disposal when you're picking teams. And yeah, as the head coach, you've got to continue and a leader in that area, you've got to continually think in with, I suppose, two mindsets, a strategical mindset and probably a more business mindset. So, yes, strategically, I do want them all to be faster and bigger and more powerful and all that. But from a business mindset, I really want, I've got X amount of dollars in my roster, invested in my roster. How many of those dollars am I losing every week because a player can't play or can't train and help in the preparation of the team? It sounds a little bit cold blooded, I suppose, but it's just the way you can frame a more holistic argument at the end of the day. So it is important to be able to, in order to grow and develop those things, like you say, being faster and more powerful and better, you need to be healthy. You need to be available so you can do the preparation required to get better. So it's the foundation stone.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that friction or bucketing of business and strategic. I don't think that's cold blooded. I think it's really a part of any organization for the leader, right? Even the U.S. healthcare system, folks are always trying
Yeah.
to figure out, hey, we've got to make money from patients so we can pay our doctors, nurses, but at the same time, we want our patients to get better, right? And how do you balance the business with the strategic side?
Yeah, totally. That is a hugely conflicted position to hold in healthcare, especially in public healthcare, I'd imagine, where your mission is to look after people and to take care of people, young and old, but then you've got an overriding requirement to make the business sustainable because it can't just be a free for all. So, and then identifying how to improve health so that there's less money spent on healthcare in itself. You know what I mean? So, um, it is. I do think though that by understanding the business of that, or the business part of that position, it helps you in um, the other part, the strategical or the developmental part, which says, okay, now I know how the business runs, so I can do this to achieve the goals that I'm looking to achieve in the strategic part. I think they go together when you're in the leadership part. I think very much that health is often, from a leader's point of view, health is often pushed into a different sector. They look to try to push it down into, well, not down, across into a physio or to a doctor or to a nutritionist or whatever it might be. Yes, there's an expert role to play, but as the leader, your knowledge in being able to understand what those people are bringing you and what those people are bringing the team is really important, because that's how you put it all together. I've often been accused of always having a team with two doctors, the real doctor plus me. So the
Yeah.
but it's having that knowledge because it helps you tie the whole process together.
Hmm. Yeah, and especially with the terms and descriptions and focus you're talking about, if energy is really, the outcome of health, right? And you're the leader of an organization, right? You have to be involved in some way, and at least in understanding, maybe not to the tactical level of a subject matter expert, but certainly at least well aware of the strategy and the tools that are being used.
Yeah, and also the monitoring of, like being able to see where players are at any given time. Where are they with their recovery? Um, where are they with their well-being? How do we monitor in the most, you know, you'll never get fully objective monitoring, but semi-objective way, and what's the patterns that occur according to the training that we do, and understanding all of that so you can periodize, and you can also understand a player, even the simplest thing, a player who might RPE or rate an exercise high all the time, or one who rates the same, different player rates exactly the same exercise low all the time. So you get to understand the thresholds of players and what players think is difficult enough, what's taking their energy, what's giving them energy.
Yeah, and I think one of the key, I guess, takeaways for me, I just want to circle back on is we talk a lot about building energy and giving energy. Is there a time where or a tactic you've seen where the energy is going the opposite direction, right? And what's a tactic or tactics that you've used to kind of reverse the momentum as you kind of explain?
Well, yeah, and you can see definitely times inside of your team or in the preparation when energy goes down, sometimes easily explainable because it can be based off results or injury or negative things that have happened to the team. And sometimes it can come just through overload, right? Not being able to manage the load in a way that, even though you might still be able to perform, you're slowly but surely eating away at that energy levels in your team. And then once it's almost like I said, how it can create momentum on the way up, it can also do it on the way down. So there's different techniques, both physically and mentally, around how do I change the trajectory of where this is going. Firstly, the ability to identify it, right, and understand exactly where it's going, because often that can be missed. And we talked about monitoring, and as well as your instinct of watching, etc., and making sure that that's on cue. And then you've also got to use the mental tactic as well. So you can have the physical downloading side of things, or being able to make adjustments or variations in what you're doing, and how your planning might work. Or it might be more a mental tactic to change that around, and how to find a new source of energy, either mentally or physically. You know what I mean? It could be through a different type of stimulus. We're going to do a different type of training that's going to give us energy, because it's not always rest that gives you energy. It's about how you then find that next source and resource of it. It's almost like drilling for gold. Where do I find the next path from?
Right. Well, this is great, Michael. I think some great takeaways. I think for me and other leaders out there is that simplification of health really is providing availability around the resources you have. You only have so many resources. And I think the second point I take away is related to the resources is you really have to understand the business part as a leader, because you do only have so many resources. Where do those resources come from in order to enhance the strategic approach for your patients, athletes, warfighters that may be looking to improve there? And I think the last piece, which to me is the most powerful, is a lot of times leaders may pass off the health component and health decisions further down the chain, which isn't wrong, because that's where the expertise is in those areas. But ultimately, it's the leader's responsibility to, monitor and implement and really be aware of the health strategy that's going on, because that's what creates that energy and availability for your team.
Yeah, definitely. The interpretation of things, you know what I mean? And also being able to combine it with, like you talked about early on, your instinct, and your intuition. And, we're getting a lot of data and a lot of different information that's coming in, and, different people have different ways of using that in leadership around health as well. Often, you use it. I like to help use it to disprove theories. So I've got a theory, right? Yep. And I'll use it because I can maybe sometimes manipulate that information to prove my theory, but it's very hard to manipulate the information so that it disproves your theory. And if you can see the information that disproves your theory or contradicts it a little way or questions it, it's a good way to make sure that you can get yourself to the exact destination of or source of a problem or to the issue exactly that you want to deal with.
Yeah, data can be a great exclusionary criteria, right, to move away
Mm-hmm.
from something.
I think it's a good place to start, you know what I mean, especially if you're new to it as well and you're not great at interpreting it or if it's a good place to start. So I feel this, you use your intuition and your own expertise. That's why you're in that position as the coach or the leader and you say, I think this, okay, is there a way that this because obviously when you think it, you want it to happen, you want to be right.
Hmm.
That's pretty logical. So if you can try and disprove it with that information first or challenge it, then it gives you a good step towards saying, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm going to go this direction.
Hmm. Well, great. I know your time's tight. You're down in Argentina and commuting back and forth with Europe and Argentina. So I want to thank you for taking the time today.
Thanks, mate.